Welcome, everybody, to MCE Special Finance Committee meeting. This is Wednesday, July 29th, and we're beginning at 10 a.m. Can we please start with roll call?
Belvedere,
Present.
Lafayette,
Present.
Larkspur, Napa County,
Here.
Vallejo. Quorum established.
Thank you very much. My understanding, I know that Director Andres is excused. That was prearranged, and hopefully Director Committee Member Palmares will be joining us soon once he gets through some traffic issues. So let the public know that. Let's go ahead and start this for public open time for items that are not on the agenda. Do we have any public comment?
I see no raised hands on Zoom, Chair.
Thank you very much. Moving to item number 3, which is our consent calendar. We have one item, which are meeting minutes from June 25th, 2026. Do we have any changes or edits for that consent item? Not seeing any. Do we have any public comment?
I'm not seeing any raised hands online, Chair.
Very good. Do we have a motion and a second to approve this item?
So moved. Oh, I think you're on mute. Sorry. Otherwise, didn't mean to step on your motion.
Sorry, I'll second Wilkinson.
Very good. So we have a motion by McCormick, a second by Wilkinson. Roll call, please.
Belvedere,
Yes.
Lafayette,
Yes.
Napa County.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Very good. Moving on to item number 4, and this is the report from our Chief Executive Officer. Are you ready to provide a report or an update?
Sure. Thank you. Good morning, committee members, the staff, and members of the public. First item is MCE reopened the popular EV instant rebate program. Since 2019, we have provided $8.2 million in EV rebates to 2,737 customers. Demand for the rebates increased in late 2025, largely because of the early expiration of the federal EV tax credit, and the funds were expended before the end of the calendar year. Your board approved just over $2.4 million to fund the program this fiscal year, which will support roughly 700 to 1,200 rebates, depending on the mix of new and used vehicles. Before reopening the program, staff strengthened income verification processes, rules for participating dealers, and updated legal and marketing materials. The rebates provide $3,500 off the purchase or lease of a new EV or plug-in hybrid, and up to $2,000 off a used EV or plug-in hybrid at the point of sale. Customer eligibility is based on income at 400% of the federal poverty level or participation in another qualifying program, such as supplemental security income. Through this program, we'll continue reducing upfront barriers to EV adoption and help more income-qualified customers access cleaner transportation options. We look forward to reporting progress to the board this fall. The next item I have is an update on MCE's workforce development efforts to support upcoming Bay Area Air District Regulation 9 Rule 6.0 NOx water heater standards, which requires the transition away from gas, water, and space heating. We've been supporting the Sprint to 9 to 6 Contractor Readiness Working Group, which is a regional partnership helping contractors prepare for the new requirements. Since January of this year, MCE has partnered with BayREN to provide 5 regional heat pump water heater trainings, and we've been pleased with the strong turnout. The most recent training reached 75 contractors from Marin, Napa, and Sonoma counties, along with another 90 contractors from Contra Costa and Solano at the UA Local 342 Training Center in Concord. This fall, MCE will host contractor workshops in Marin and Napa, and is also hoping to plan another UA Local 342. The Marine workshop will connect job trainees with hiring contractors, while the Napa workshop, in partnership with Napa Bayron, will focus on contractor training. Through these efforts, MCE is helping build the skilled workforce needed to support building electrification and expand access to clean energy careers across the region. I also want to add that this board has been interested in providing further funding for as amended in the budget. So all these trainings will feed into that effort as well too, as you see fit. So that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you for those community program updates, Vicken. Do we have any questions from board members? None? Okay, very good. Do we have any public comment on the CEO's update?
I see no raised hands online, Chair.
Very good, thank you. Let's move on to item number 5. This is a review draft management analysis and discussion with draft financial statements for fiscal year ending 2026. And this is a discussion. There'll be no recommendation, but I'm sure we'll have a good discussion. And who will be presenting this?
Yeah, our CFO, Maida Strauss. Go ahead, Maida.
Thank you, Maida.
Thank you, Vicken. Thank you, Chair. So actually, for this item, I am going to have Afrin Akshala, Manager of Finance, presenting the item. So Afrin has been the lead staff on this project. So I would like for you all to hear from him. And because we have the structure of the Finance Committee, we are going to be able to ask questions for him and him to answer questions firsthand on how interesting this audit has been. Afrin, please.
Thanks, Maida.
So sorry,
Hi,
Efren.
Vicken. Yeah.
My sincere apologies.
Yes.
Director Palmeras has joined from the Concord office. I just want to recognize Director.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say something too. I appreciate that. And so committee, Director Palmares, we are on the MCE Finance Committee's review of the draft management and analysis discussion with draft financial statements fiscal year ending 2026. Just follow the CEO update. Thank you.
Sorry,
Thank
Efren. Go ahead, please. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks, Vicken. And thank you, Maida. So as Maida stated, I've been working on this audit for the past 2 months now. It's been perhaps one of the most intensive audits, at least since I've been at MCE. We've been navigating new GASB rules. We've also been navigating significantly expanded testing for some of our power contracts. So it's been a lot of good work between procurement, human resources, and many others throughout the agency. So huge thank you if any of those folks are watching for helping us get to this point. So as Maida mentioned, our first item is a review of the draft management discussion and analysis section, or what I will be calling the MD&A section for this meeting. And attached to this section is also draft financial statements for fiscal year ended 2026. Again, this is a discussion only item, and we are not requesting any sort of approval. What we are seeking today is your feedback and questions on the MD&A narrative, specifically as to whether it clearly and objectively communicates the results for the fiscal year and the drivers. So the statements do remain subject to the audit, and we unfortunately cannot make changes. But we don't expect significant changes between now and the final audited financials, which your committee will receive towards the end of August. As a quick refresher, the MD&A section is required supplementary information that comes before the financial statements. It is an opportunity for management to explain the drivers behind the year's results, as well as an opportunity to compare them against the prior fiscal year. It also gives us a chance to describe currently known conditions expected to affect the year ahead. A couple of notes on what's in the statement. You will now see that the draft financials reflect the $80 million contribution to the operating reserve fund, which your board approved earlier this month. Some other key numbers to keep in mind: our change in that position, or the bottom line, was $1.4 million. Operating revenues were down $115 million year over year, driven mainly by the $80 million reserve contribution, which, as you will recall from our last meeting, is recorded as a reduction of revenue. We also had slightly lower retail sales due to mild weather, which reduced revenue by $33 million. And in terms of operating expenses, those were down by $107 million, reflecting the timing of renewable energy deliveries, which, as you may also recall, shifted costs into the prior fiscal year. We also saw lower CAISO market costs as a result of the mild summer that affected MCE service area. In terms of looking ahead, the MD&A also flagged the April rate reduction, the planned $62 million reserve recognition in fiscal year 27, as well as the amendment to the Royal Bank of Canada credit facility. And just a very quick note before I wrap up my speech. As you consider your feedback on the MD&A section, we do want to remind you that the GASB guidelines are very specific as to what can be placed in this section. So while we encourage your input and we welcome it, some items may unfortunately fall out of the scope, but we will do our best to incorporate your feedback where appropriate. And the final audit statements will return to this committee with Baker Tilly's report. So with that, we will open it up for discussion.
Thank you, Efren. Appreciate that. Do we have any directors with any questions or comments?
Are we going to do questions and comments together?
We can do questions first.
Oh, it doesn't matter. I mean, either way. I'm not sure what I
It's fine.
Director Wilkinson, you're welcome to go first. It doesn't matter.
I'm fine. You go ahead.
Okay. So thank you, Efren. I guess one question, and I'm cognizant of the structure that we have and like the rules around what we can put in it. But I did worry looking at the analysis because I'm sure it's gonna be curious. A lot of people are curious about it. I mean, it feels like looking at it, we really did have MCE had quite a good financial year. And we actually had a good enough year that we were able to put the money aside, to increase our reserves, to allow for rate reduction, and revenue was down, primarily because of energy requirements were down because of the cooler weather, right? I mean, it's unlike a regular company where down revenue may be perceived as negative. It's just we don't have a whole lot of control over, we have minimal control over energy demand. So I was just wondering, and that those to me are very kind of key points if a member of the public was going to look at this to understand really what happened, right? Because you look at the top line of the numbers, you would be saying, oh, wow, the revenue's down, or, our the balance sheet is, it looks worse. They do discuss it like at the end of the bottom of page 3, top of page 4, they talk a little bit about how we're able to increase the reserve fund or whatever. I mean, is there any way to maybe rearrange the sections? I would love the opening paragraph to talk about the fact that the financial performance was strong and we were able to defer, $80 million of revenue for future rate stabilization and so on. Or is that kind of fixed? I wasn't sure how much flexibility we have in that positioning.
No, I don't think so, Director. I think we can shift that language around so that we can better showcase the positive and strong results.
Right. I mean, because I don't mean this is not a press release. I don't want to. We're going to be very factual. That being said, I think there is kind of this frame we can put around it so people can understand what the difference is between last year and this year. And in fact, it was, again. All right. Anyway, thank you. That's my comment. I think we can really. I'd like to explain a little better to the general public kind of what they're seeing, because this is not like a normal business P&L that you might see.
Right.
Thank you, Director McCormick. Director Wilkinson.
I have, Efren, I have some questions around the audit broadly, and I have some comments on the MD&A as well. Is it okay to ask those questions around the audit at the same time? Because you mentioned that there was, this was a pretty aggressive audit this year. Can you talk through a little bit more? Because you said there was much more aggressive testing of power contracts in HR. Can you talk through what those look like this year versus last? And can you also let us know whether there are likely to be any significant findings?
Sure. No significant findings at this point, Director Wilkinson. If that changes, I think we will let you know, but at this point, no significant findings. In terms of the expanded testing, unlike the last year, Director Wilkinson, this year we had to provide significantly more additional data on some of the personnel costs. So we were tasked with providing backup documentation for the average merit increase, for instance, as well as pay stubs for specific staff and backup documentation that shows that those salary numbers were approved by the appropriate staff at MCE. In terms of the power contracts, for those, we were tasked with providing approval matrices for those contracts. We were tasked with also providing sample validation and settlement that clearly shows how we validated those invoices before they were paid. And we've also had discussions and a lot of back and forth with the auditors so that they can better understand our internal back office functions. And in fact, we have another call tomorrow to go over some of their last remaining questions.
Okay. And will we, as the Finance Committee, will we have a final closed session with the auditors as well as a group?
I don't know if there would be a closed session. Maybe that's a question for Catalina, but we are planning to bring you the audit, the final audit sometime in late August. And I see Maida has her hand up. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So yes, Director Wilkinson, we will have, as we always do, we will have the give you and all board members the opportunity, not only the Finance Committee, the whole, all the board members the opportunity to speak with the auditors privately without staff present. So we'll do that. And we are planning for next month to have a presentation from the auditors to the board.
So in past years, when there was an audit committee, an ad hoc audit committee, we did have a group closed session with the auditors. And given that the Finance Committee seems to be functioning in some way as reviewing the audit, is that not appropriate to have that collective discussion as well?
So I misspoke in one point. You're absolutely right. We are going to bring the auditors on the closed session in the Finance Committee, not in the entire board. Okay. In the entire board, we are going to, as we always do, we are going to select a board, a committee member to be the representative of the committee to report out to the board. Yes, I'm sorry. I
That's okay.
Spaced out for a little bit here. And also, I would like to add on what Efren was mentioning, because I was the lead person in MCE's finance audit for 6 years, and we have never dealt with the amount of work we're dealing today. Before MCE, I worked for another organization that had business in the U.S. and externally, and I dealt with their auditors. I was also the lead person there with 2 countries, and I've never seen that much work and that much detail being asked. And as Efren mentioned, the GASB regulations changing, that has increased considerably the work. But so far, the findings have all been positive. It's just a different structure from the auditors.
Thank you, Maida. Catalina, go ahead. I see your hand's been raised.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it. I just want to go back and clarify one thing regarding closed session, and we might just be using similar jargon, but there unfortunately is no exception in the Brown Act for a closed session as it relates to an audit. In the past, the committee has been an ad hoc committee. So we did not have a quorum of any of our standing committees, and so they were able to meet separately with the auditors. And last year, we did a process where we allowed all of the board members to meet individually with the auditors. We've heard feedback, and I know that there are board members that would like to meet one-on-one or with groups. And so legal's happy to work with board members and specifically the Finance Committee so that we can coordinate board members in a way so that we are not meeting any one quorum, and hopefully also trying to avoid any serial meeting issues as you meet with the auditors. So happy to coordinate that for any of you all on the Finance Committee.
So Catalina, you're saying as a standing committee, a audit is not a justified reason for closed session?
Correct.
We do that for our city, so I'm going to let my city attorney know that. So that's good to know. Okay, so in terms of the MD&A, I agree with John's comments there, just in terms of potentially you kind of have to extract the content rather than it tell the narrative. And so I think that there may be, within the confines of what are allowed through GASB, some reorganization might be helpful. My main comment is in relation to whether this provides the transparency that it says it's trying to achieve. Because when you just lump your entire business into a line item that says energy contracts, that's not a lot of transparency to allow people to actually understand which of those buckets went up, which went down, which per megawatt hour were more expensive, which were cheaper, etc. And so I was wondering whether, where you have that breakdown of that table, whether it makes more sense to break it down in more detail so that people can see, which are the long-term contracts, like the normal Super 6 that we always talk about. I don't know whether that's allowed under GASB, but honestly, if we didn't, I don't feel like a member of the public or whoever could read this and understand what happened. There's not enough detail. It talks specifically about the timing issues on that one very large contract or multiple contracts, but it doesn't talk about the extent to which we may have purchased attribute contracts and how expensive they were this year versus, the year close versus the prior year. So it really doesn't provide a lot of clarity in terms of that piece. So that was one comment, and also that those were driven by not necessarily just state mandates; they were driven by board policy, and that's what drove those components. So that was one suggestion.
Director Wilson, really quick, I see that Maida has her hand up. Let her respond.
Okay.
Before you move on to your next item.
Okay.
Next comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So we've had a similar conversation last year with the auditors and in the beginning of this season as well. So the auditors cannot have the Super 6 in the financial statement. This is so our auditors, they are financial auditors.
Right.
They cannot audit to know if this type of contract is indeed this type of contract or not. They cannot do that, and this is outside their scope. We've had this conversation with them in detail. So what we can do is what we have been doing, which is providing the Super 6 in the quarterly treasurer's report with the detail, but we cannot, the auditors will not have that in the financial statement.
Okay. But is there a way then in the narrative to provide more? Because when it, in the paragraphs just before that table, it just says that the operating expenses decreased by 107 million, primarily attributable to 116 reduction in cost of energy. And then it just says energy costs fluctuate by load, prices, contract term, resource adequacy. It doesn't, can you flesh that out at least? Because we know what were the key drivers, and even if you can't specifically break it down in the tables, is there a way to provide more of a narrative than is there right now?
Can you give a better example? Like, can you explain a little bit more what you mean by adding more detail?
Well, so to explain there that in the prior fiscal year that contract prices for Index Plus and however you explain that were extremely elevated, and that explained a large part of the increase. And moving into the year just closed, that those prices declined, but we had some multi-year contracts, etc. Because that's the bulk of it, along with the RA, correct? That is the explanation for why we had such a high energy price the prior fiscal year and less true in 2026, along with this weird contract and unanticipatedly warm weather. It feels like there's a more fulsome response than is described here.
We can work on that. If Viken has additional thoughts too,
Yeah.
we can work on that and see where we could
Yeah.
bring in to. It's a balance of
I
giving
know.
more information, but not too much information that the auditors are going to say no, because we can't have that there. So
Yeah, I understand that, and so it's a balance. But I think even if it's more in the narrative, and then the other sort of comment in relation to that, where you're talking about currently known facts, decisions, or conditions, would it be useful there, even though it's not, it's an ongoing discussion as to whether there may be changes in board policy that may, particularly in relation to buying, attributes that's a known condition, that conversation is happening right now, and what impact that might have going forward.
So in this section, we don't usually talk about
I guess.
future strategy.
Yeah, it's just, I guess, because it's an ongoing discussion right now. We're right in the middle of it.
Yeah, it's outside of the dates that we are talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. They're my comments. That's all I have. Then everything makes sense otherwise.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Wilkinson. I appreciate that. Yes, Director Palmares, and you're on mute. There you go.
Thank you. On page 5, on the bottom of page 5, there's a paragraph about PCIA, and it kind of comments that PCIA is affecting us indirectly, but not in a it affects our revenue, but probably not in a direct way. But would it be possible to get maybe a ballpark figure on how the lack of transparency or data transparency in the PCIA is affecting our customers? I mean, that's one of the bills that we're pushing for right now is AB 1761, and I wonder if we can include some sort of number or figure about that.
Director Palmares, I'd like to ask a little bit of Carolina's input.
Yeah.
Sorry, couldn't come off mute fast enough. I think that is because it's an indirect, it doesn't apply to MCE's direct costs. I'm not sure that if the auditors would want us to include that or if we could change that. I think that if we can add it, we can try to seek those numbers, and I can check in with our policy folks to see if we have kind of an overall number that would apply to our customers, and we can try to add a little bit more narrative. I think that would just be a question, not to kick it back to you, Maida, but just if we can add that additional detail, we can certainly try to provide that. I don't have that number off it, but I can get that in this group.
Yeah, and
if it's easy to grab that data, then that'll be amazing to include that there. But I imagine it is a little bit difficult, so it's not a deal breaker for me. But just it would be nice to communicate that to our customers as well, as far as how that lack of transparency is affecting their bills.
Yeah, I don't know if the scope would allow us, Director Palmares, simply because the currently known facts and decisions, it's supposed to highlight factors or conditions that will affect the year ahead, so the current fiscal year. And if we're not able to make that connection, I think it might be out of scope. But we can
I see.
look into it. Yeah.
Okay. I understand.
This is a good input that maybe we can think about that for next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not going to be a small number. That's my guess, because I think it's what Cal CCA, they had a figure of what was it in 2019, $16 million for CCA customers in California. So I assume our customers paid a fair share of that amount as well. So it's not nothing, and it's affecting them downstream. So I think it's worth, if not now, then in the future, elaborating that in our documentation.
thank you for that comment. I think that's useful. And I'm reading it said page bottom 5, changes in the PCA do not directly affect MC's reported revenues and expenses. However, they affect customers' total electricity bills, may influence MC's rate competitiveness, customer participation, and future rate setting decisions. So that's a good comment to take forward for the following year. I don't have any additional questions or comments. I thought it was a very good audit. I do think there's a good point in terms of, and I'm just used to with past audits I've looked at. There's a section in terms of findings. It's not described as findings here. It's under, find it again. It's under currently known facts, decisions, and conditions, but there's nothing that says actual findings. And I don't know if that's just not normal for this kind of audit. But that is something that I think the layperson often looks for. They're also they're trying to pick up, what are the takeaways here? So I think that, is kind of useful. It's just great information. It shows the 14% reduction in customer generation rates. It shows the 80 million that was approved to go back into the operating reserves, and the 62 million that was previously withdrawn from those reserves for that 14% reduction rate. I like also how in the beginning it kind of gives you some vocabulary in terms of this is what statement of net position is in terms of how it compares to what a balance sheet is. Because again, the finances here may be different than what, people use in terms of QuickBooks or regular business. So I think it's a great report. It looks very in depth, and I appreciate all the hard work that's gone behind it or into it. Let's go ahead and see if there's any public comment.
I see a hand raised by Dan Segedin.
Yes, Dan. Thank you for joining us. You have 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I wanted to just highlight a couple things. One is that I agree with Director McCormick's observation that a reordering might be in order, so to speak. There is a positive story here. The operating income is obviously 80 million higher than shown. So there is a positive story here. It isn't a marking document, but I think, it just, if there is a reordering possible, agree with Director McCormick's comments. Also agree with Director Wilkinson's comments that, and I hear what you said about the Super 6, that you can include that, but it just seems like the whole story around energy costs gets very muddled when you're combining these completely different type of contracts. I mean, long-term PPAs are completely different from the Index Plus, which are obviously completely different from the hedges. And to kind of not see that breakdown in either the table, so you can see where the changes are occurring, or in the description where these are kind of named and saying, well, this moved by this much and this moved by that much. Given these are just completely different things with different risk characteristics and different volatilities, obviously long-term PPAs are probably not moving much. That all kind of gets hidden within this big grouping and kind of these descriptions that are in the paragraph. So whatever you can do within the constraints you identified, Maida, of what the auditor's saying, to kind of blow that out a little more and explain it in terms of the Super 6 would just be super helpful, because this, as written, kind of knowing a bit more than what it says, it doesn't really tell the story of what happened. So at any rate, those are my comments. Appreciate your work on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
I see no other raised hands online, Chair.
Great. Does staff have any other comments or questions back to the directors before we close this item?
I just have one. This is really great. So I appreciate all the input. And Dan's input as well. I'm struggling a little bit to understand about, when we talk about the PPAs, Index Plus, and hedges. So we're talking about explaining market dynamics as they change in a previous fiscal year audit. If possible, how do we want the auditors to quantify data? The questions again are very righteous. It's just that I feel like they don't belong to the audit because they're not auditing markets in how we performed in California ISO footprint. That's a whole different discussion that we've been having with the public and the board and different committees. But we can look into it to see what we can add. But I just want to share my thoughts that what kind of a burden or task we need to give to the auditors to audit performances of PPAs, index plus, and hedges in a continuous market dynamics of the CAISO. Because I don't think they have a clue about that. I'm just being honest.
Okay, do you mind if
How would they be auditing it on what we did?
But Vic, jumping in here, the MD&A is meant to, as you say in your document, clearly and objectively communicate MCE's 26 financial results, adequately explain the principal reasons for the year-over-year changes. And the narrative doesn't do that. It just says that there's one particular contract, timing issue, but otherwise it's just energy was more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
there's a seasonal effect. That
Okay.
isn't, as Dan said, there are specific buckets that we paid a lot more for, certainly not for long-term PPAs. That wasn't where the swing was. Normally, in terms of financial statements, you have a good narrative explaining
Okay.
the details. So it's not what you guys write this section, correct? Efron, you wrote this. So this is up to you to write it in a way that that readers can understand that is allowed under GASB.
Okay.
So a little bit more qualitative in terms of a qualitative executive summary of the context around the data. Is that what I'm hearing, Dr. Wilkinson?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So a lay
Okay.
reader can
Got it.
understand what happened.
Yeah, I thank you for that explanation. I missed it. But I just want to add also that we will be when we bring to you next month, the closure of the fiscal year discussion of the previous fiscal year, the budget and everything. We're going to take a specific tangent on to explain a impact of of procurement, the timing of the procurement, when the load happened, and what the cost was that impacted our budget. I think that will provide significant amount of. We're going to shed a lot of light with the public and the committee and the board on what happened the previous fiscal year. But that's more to come. But appreciate the time, Director Wilkinson and Director Alessio, for explaining.
Thank you so much. And Efra and Maida, thank you for your continued hard work. We appreciate it. It's a great report. Thank you. So we'll move on to item number 6, and this is an overview policy of, looks like it's 013, MCE's reserve policy, and this is for discussion. It looks like, Maida, are you going to be presenting this?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Oh, Officer.
So for this item, I'm going to keep the presentation short so we can focus on the committee's questions. And the purpose is to get feedback on whether MCE's current 204-day liquidity target remains appropriate and whether the reserve policy should be simplified to focus on days liquidity on hand as the primary measure. So MCE's current policy includes both reserve percentage, which is concentrated on that, and also a liquidity target. But over time, the reserve percentage has become less meaningful as a measure of financial strength after the creation of the operating reserve fund, which it functions more as a rate stabilization mechanism and holds deferred revenue. So the reserve percentage no longer provides a clear picture of availability for liquidity. So days liquidity on hand is simpler, easier to communicate, and more directly tied to MCE's ability to support operations and managing uncertainties that comes our way. So as part of this review, staff looked at liquidity practice across public agencies, and we observed that agencies with higher level of cash and liquidity generally tend to have stronger credit profiles. And that's generally, I'll come back to that. Because there is no direct relationship between days cash on hand and credit ratings. So the rating agencies, they consider a range of factors, including an agency's operation model, the finance performance, asset ownership, governance, rate setting, risk profile, a whole bunch of things. And liquidity is a very important consideration, but it's not the one with a one-piece picture. Also, Director Wilkinson sent us a comment via email regarding exactly what I just said regarding liquidity and credit rating. And this morning, I did a quick analysis on work that we already had, and I found an interesting piece. So while days cash on hand usually means higher credit agency ratings, I found, as an example, one of our CCAs that has more days cash on hand than MCE with one little notch lower credit rating. So even though they had more cash, they have on the year, they had more than 200 million more than we have, and they have credit rating with a little bit lower. So while there is a relation, that is not the only thing that we found. So I thought that was important also to touch base. So with that, I'll stop here and I'll open up for questions and continue the discussion.
And Maida, can I just go ahead? I've read this report, and I don't see a staff recommendation, and this is for discussion only. But do you believe, as a CFO, that's an expert in this area, do you believe that we are on target, or is there a recommendation from staff where we can strengthen this policy? Because I didn't quite see that.
Sure. So one thing there was, to make it simpler, we could drop the reserve portion of it, because on the reserve, we don't count whatever amount we might have on ORF. It might be 70 million last year. Now we deposit 80 million. So that amount is not counting. So that is a bit obsolete, if I could say that. So we could drop that piece. The days cash on hand, we have a 240 target that we hit a few years ago, and then we went down, and now we hit again. So this is, with 240 days, is it enough for us to keep our operations? We don't have that, great, but also we don't have any assets. So, and the market fluctuates a lot. So it's 240 days. Is it good? It's good. Is it fantastic? No, because we know how swings can hit us very hard. So this is, that's why we put the analysis on the staff report, that we should consider targeting higher and having a higher target. And also you could see that a lot of CCAs, they have way more, when I say way more, is hundreds of millions more than their target, larger CCAs in the Bay Area. So we also see that they don't, their policy is more of a guideline. I hope that helped answer the question.
That provides a lot more clarity for myself. Thank you. Let's go ahead and go to questions, and feel free to make comments at the same time, Director Wilkinson, and then we'll take it to the public comment.
Thanks. So Maida, I agree in terms of just reconstituting the policy so it just focuses on days cash on hand. That makes perfect sense to me. I had a question just backing up a little bit though, which is, one of the main purposes of having a certain level of days cash on hand is to get negotiate good conditions in terms of contracts. And so my question to you is, when you're entering into whether these long-term PPAs or wherever else they're looking at your financial profile, do they do more than just look at your credit rating? I mean, is there a lot more financial information that you have to provide, or is essentially the credit rating the primary driver of what those contract terms are?
Credit rating is the primary driver.
Okay, because I did the. Sorry, go ahead.
And also our financials are on the website. So if they are detailed looking at our financial statements, we don't really know that. It's not part of what they ask. It's already available to them. So mostly we have, as you probably see in our contracts, that we have a table that with our credit rating and whether you request collateral or not.
Yeah. It's interesting for me. I did the same analysis you did this morning. I was just curious in terms of with the agencies that you'd listed here in terms of their days cash on hand, and with the exception, I didn't go through all of them, went through most of them. It doesn't matter whether you have 150 days cash on hand or whether you have 670 days cash on hand. You're a stable outlook. And so really, if the main purpose of the reserves is to get a good credit rating to secure good financial conditions, we can do that whether at 150 days or 670 days. And so, and I think they all have a similar credit rating because, as you say, those factors in terms of operating model, financial performance, governance, assets, they're pretty much identical across many of these CCAs. And so the rating agencies are looking at them as a sort of single, in a very similar way. And so I disagree with you in terms of the need to target more reserves, because we have to understand this is ratepayer money. And so you're charging too much to the current consumer to potentially give back to a future consumer. And so there's intergenerational, intertemporal issues there in terms of doing that. So you have to be really careful in terms of the level of reserves that you target and reserves days cash on hand. So we have about 8 months of liquidity. This year has absolutely proven, as far as I can see, that we have completely sticky customers, because even though we're more expensive than PG&E, it doesn't look like we're seeing any loss of customers, and we have no plans to do any asset purchases. So it really raises the question of why would we possibly want to accumulate more reserves and overcharge our customers unless you have a very strong sense of where the market's going, or the PCIA, or other reasons why you want to keep putting more money into the operating reserve. I don't see any reason to target more than the current 240. And if it was my view, I'd go lower. But 240 to me is a sort of high mark to me. And I think whenever we're at that level, and understanding that the denominator is incredibly volatile, and that's why it affects that ratio every year and every budget. I think we should be targeting our budgets once we're at our reserve level to be balanced. We're a non-profit public agency. We shouldn't be targeting profits if we're already meeting our days cash on hand, would be my view. So to me, the 240 feels like a high mark. I certainly wouldn't go any higher, because there's no benefit in terms of your credit rating, and no benefit in terms of, therefore, how you negotiate financial contracts, and our customers are sticky. So you should just be fair and charge your customer according to what it's costing you that year. So that would be my perspective.
Mm-hmm. Director McCormick.
Great. Yes. Thank you. And no, I think Director Wilkinson's points are all well taken. A couple of quick, or just an observation that I think one of the reasons why the percentage, just throw it out there, the percentage of the percentage reserve was probably there is because that's how all of us cities think of things. That's our targets. We're all targeting percentage of budget and potential. So that's kind of why I think if you would ask your board members, that's what they would kind of come up with as a logical thing to put in there. So I think the days on hand totally makes sense. It'll just be kind of a bit of we may get a little bit of pushback, because I think that's just not how we are thinking typically about a public agency like a city. One question, so I'm totally fine. I think 240 is fine, even a little lower would probably be fine. Question, it looked like in your analysis, some of the agencies have a minimum and maximum also. Is that how it's true? There's a table there that kind of talked about minimum and maximum. But are we also proposing to do a minimum and a maximum also? Or does everybody else have that also?
A lot of agencies have, but not all of them. Um, we could have it. There's nothing to say that we don't have it. They also say that after hitting a certain level, they are open to capital investments. So that's
Right.
why they have those levels. But I haven't seen any real difference or advantage, and it might just make it more complicated.
Well, I appreciate that because I think you're right. It would make it more complicated. I'm just thinking a maximum might actually address Director Wilkinson's concern a little bit. Like, the point of it isn't just to accumulate cash for cash sake. And having a maximum where, I mean, you really couldn't say it'd be hard to say I can't go over because like what are you going to do if you have extra cash? It's going to go someplace. But that it would trigger, as you say, some sort of action on benefit of the ratepayer or benefit of MCE to do something because we are accruing too much cash. So maybe that's just something to consider. Again, I appreciate the simplicity, so I don't want to go against that. But I kind of think, it's not a bad way to think about, there's a certain minimum number where it's worth emergency, meetings to figure out where we are and do some other stuff. There can you imagine a minimum, you can imagine a maximum. I mean, one of the agencies we looked at had a maximum of 180 days. Right? It's like, holy cow, that's beyond what we are thinking of as our normal. So I don't know. But again, I don't want to complicate things. I actually don't really have a strong recommendation. It's just an observation that it could help express our values in a way in this policy that kind of talks about how we're dealing with ratepayers' money. So anyway, just a thought.
Thank you. Before I go back to Director Wilkinson, Director Palmares, do you have any comments or questions?
It's a very interesting discussion. I feel like I have to stew on this a little bit longer. I don't think I have a very strong opinion one way or another. I hear Director Wilkinson's comments, makes sense to me, but I also understand Ms. Strauss's what she's pushing for in this. So I don't really have a strong opinion about it right now.
Thank you. Director Wilkinson.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I was just thinking through John's discussion there in terms of having a corridor. And I think it might be I don't feel strongly about it, but because part of the issue to me with is the volatility of the measure because of the denominator. And so I don't know whether a corridor would make that better or worse. I'm not really sure, but it might be worth some more thought from staff as to modeling that backwards to see what a corridor, whether there'd be any benefit of it. I don't know whether there would be. And I had a question, which is obviously Sonoma Clean Power, their days cash on hand is insane. And if I was a board member there, I'd be asking what the hell's going on. Are they planning to buy assets? Is that why they're accumulating reserves? Because it's such a high level. Does anybody know?
I don't know, Director Wilson. I don't know. I don't know if anyone else knows. But also they have a much smaller operation. So for them to hit a larger days cash on hand, it's much easier. They have a simpler operation than us.
They
And
are.
also, oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to confirm they are planning on buying assets, buying and owning. They're
Yeah.
working on
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so that makes a lot more sense if that's the case, because otherwise, if I was a ratepayer, I'd be really annoyed with them. So, but we're not in that position. So those are sort of outliers. But anyway, so I say the 240 to me would be a high mark in terms of setting budgets. But it might be worth a discussion or more analysis of whether a corridor would be helpful in some way. And obviously, if the board policy changes in relation to asset acquisition, then the reserve policy changes as well. But we're not at that position right now. Oh, and the other comment I want to make in relation to John was that I hear what you say. As cities, we all look at just reserves, and that's how we're all familiar with it. But we don't defer income, and so that's why we've got this weird thing here with MCE. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to share my thoughts here. I think, obviously we're balancing the swings of the market that are and the weather that we have no control over. when I say it's really staff is doing that, our financial experts here. Along with balancing that with what's the best rate, competitive rate that we can give our ratepayers, because we know that's very important to them. I think your point is really well made, Dr. Wilkinson, on this, on the stickiness. I will say that PG&E they did include a flat fee. So it doesn't look like it's on the rate, but there's a new flat fee that's embedded in everybody's bills, including MCE customers. And next year, it's been told to me that PG&E's rates are going to really increase. There's a big increase coming in the new calendar year, is what I was told. But going back to this decision of how much we put in reserves, how do we balance that with the days on hand and the risk and the volatility and the ratepayers? It's a lot to manage. And I appreciate staff's, constant work and attention to this. I'm of the mindset that I'd like to increase the days on hand, not by a lot, but I hear what staff is saying, and I want to give them the ability to keep the ship stable with all those different components happening. And again, that's being mindful to the ratepayers, but being really mindful to the swings that are occurring to MCE in a market that we don't have a lot of control over. So, it looks like we're real low already when the comparison. That's a really good point about bringing up what Sonoma Clean Power is doing in terms of their number of days. That does seem exorbitant, but now we understand why. So I would opt to definitely staying where we are, to even bumping up a little bit to staff's recommendation. And again, always being mindful of our ratepayers and our mission here in terms of renewable and clean energy. I'm going to go ahead and let's go provide public comment. See if there's any public comment here. I bet there is.
Yes, I see a hand raised by Dan Sagadin.
Dan? Whenever you're
Thank
ready,
you.
Dan.
Yeah, thank you. We agree you should drop the reserve policy as measured by net position. That is subject to, you can change it literally just by making accounting entries. And I can tell you, as advocates, we were kind of, a little upset when we were watching that reserve and we were told, when we get to a certain level, we'll be able to do other things or return to ratepayers. And then all of a sudden, an accounting entry can be made. And now all of a sudden, the reserve is measured by net position is now too low, even though there's no change in cash, there's no change in substance, in economic substance, you're just making an accounting entry. So bottom line is we favor dropping reserve and relying only on days cash on hand. We do think a min-max could be a good idea, but to be honest, we haven't thought about that much, and it should be something that just should be considered. And then in terms of the absolute level, I guess the rating agency, I thought at one point weighed in and said, 240 would be good. And they were kind of, I thought, indicating in a past report that you're not going to get much credit for going above that, which has kind of been confirmed by some of the analysis. So I guess our starting position would be stay at 240, maybe add a range if you want, a min-max per Director McCormick, but, not shift that range upward or downward based on the point that you're probably not going to impact the credit rating at all. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Dan, for your comments. And I'm hearing Dan kind of echo what staff's recommending, or our CFO is recommending. Do we have any other public comments?
I see no additional hands, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So next steps for this, does this come to a future board meeting? Or is this just for a committee discussion and review?
We would have to bring to a future board meeting if we want to amend the policy.
Okay.
Then the next step would be I would come up with a red line of the current policy, bring it back to FinCom, and then we do XCOM and board.
Okay, well, today's agenda item says discussion only, and
Yes.
there's no recommendation to bring this back to a future, to the board meeting or back here. So we're going to keep it as is, and this is just really for transparency and discussion. I want to ask if the committee is fine with that, or would you like us to bring this back to this committee for a potential recommendation to the board for a future board discussion and recommendation or decision?
Can I jump in there? I mean, I'd love to hear from Maida whether she thinks this sort of discussion of a corridor makes sense. And if it doesn't, I think we should probably just make a recommendation that we amend the policy to exclusively focus on days cash on hand and keep the target at 240 days. Unless, Maida, I'm sure you thought about that corridor aspect. So if you wish to do more work on it, then we should wait. But if you think it's not useful, then maybe we can just make that recommendation already.
Yeah, I think so. I think that kind of streamlines it a little bit and sound like we were all in general agreement. So no, I'm kind of curious in the corridor. I mean, I think it might be worth discussing, but I don't have a strong opinion. So yeah, no, I would support that position.
Ida, do you have any thoughts on that since you're being
Yes.
asked?
Yes, I think that the corridor, the range is a really good idea for us, but I think that might be something that we can go back after we work on some other items that are frontline for us at MCE,
Totally.
because I think that in there we should start thinking of like, how do we go deeper into helping our customers with keeping stable rate? So what can we do that? How can we improve our strategy to really bringing a value to our customers and really bringing up a real way to keep our rates more stable, and considering all the forces that get thrown into us, whether it's actual weather or PG&E or the market, things that we cannot control. How can we invest on other things that we can control? I think this is something that we can start thinking about it, but maybe this more realistically should it to the future when we can get into those.
So what I'm hearing here is that this committee would like a future agenda item. I'm just going to say it now, to follow up on this discussion and this policy for potential recommendations for potential changes in the policy that we would then therefore recommend to the board for discussion and further potential approval. That's what I'm gathering here.
Liz, I think we can already make a revision to the policy so that we focus exclusively on days cash on hand. I think that's what Maid is asking for here.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
I think we can
right now.
I think we can do that, and that would be useful for the board. You know, if you're bringing a mid-year budget update, and as you get through to next year's budget, I think having a simplified reserve policy would be helpful.
I want to check with our CEO and our counsel too, legal counsel, to make sure that we're within bounds of today's agenda and what we can do based on how the agenda was posted.
Yeah, Vic, and are you all right if I jump in first? So the committee can provide direction to staff, and then staff can bring back that item as revised based on that direction. And so we don't have to take a formal recommendation or a vote. Staff has heard the feedback, and then we can bring back a revised version.
Okay. So so what I'm hearing is that we are giving staff direction to bring this back for the agenda item that shows a potential recommendation or amendment to this policy. Okay. CEO Vicken, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, this will be really good move in the right direction, Chair, and simplifying things, and really appreciate all the discussion for the market and rates and what have you, but it will be a really good step in the right direction. Thank you so much.
Great. All right, staff, you have your direction on this, and we look forward to having this return when you can. Okay, at your when you can. We know you're working on a lot of other things. So let's move on to item number 7, time check. It's 11:05, just for everybody's awareness. And so we're now on item 7, proposed amendment of policy 014, MCE's investment policy. And there is discussion and action here.
Perfect. Thank you. So for this, our last item, we are looking at the proposed update to MCE's investment policy. So the goal today is to walk through the proposed changes and get the committee's feedback. Our investment policy is reviewed periodically to ensure it remains consistent with California law, current industry practice, and MCE investments objectives. So we worked with Carlos Oblitis, who is joining us today on the line as well from Chandler Asset Management. And he is MCE's investment advisor. Most of you had met him already in previous meetings. And we have done a comprehensive review of the policy. The proposed changes are primarily focused on incorporating statutory updates, improving clarity, and providing additional flexibility within our existing investment framework, and maintaining the core priorities of safety, liquidity, and then returns. To make the discussion and action item easier today, I encourage everyone to have the red line version of the policy handy. And with that, I will now turn over to Carlos for a brief introduction, and then he will walk us through all the proposed changes in the red line and highlight the key revisions so we can follow along the document as we go.
Very good.
Carlos, please.
Thank you very much, Maida. Good morning, directors and committee members. As Maida stated, I'm Carlos Oblitas. I'm a senior portfolio strategist with Chandler Asset Management. I've met most of you before and presented to you in the past. My primary role as a member of Chandler's investment team, my primary role is to, among things like setting the strategies for how we're going to manage your money and making sure that they support your overall financial objectives. Part of my role is to keep up on what happens with the California government code and how the law changes and how it impacts your investment policy. So we do have some changes for you, as Maida aptly stated. This year, I focused on a couple of things. I focused on some recent updates to California code, which I think are important for you to capture. They're not required, but I think that they put you in a better position to enhance diversification and enhance return potential. I also focused on putting some asset classes that in the past, when we initially started working with you, you had not yet included, and we think that they're good for you to include. And then lastly, we did make a change to maturities for certain asset classes. I think that's probably the most key change here. And there's a nuance to this, and I want to make sure that I explain it well. So I think we're going to go through the red line, is what we said. So with that, I'm going to share my screen, if that's okay with you. And it looks like it is not turned on. So maybe what I can do is I can discuss the changes, and then I can discuss any specific line item that you may have.
Carlos, this is Justine Parmalee at MCE. I just gave you permission. You should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. And hopefully you can see my screen now. And maybe there's a delay. I'm sorry.
We can see it now, Carlos. There's just a little delay. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so let me make sure I make it out to the right report. Policy. Here we go. Okay, so I can take it from the top and just roll right through with it. The objectives, the governance doesn't change very much. Things like the delegation of authority, ethics and conflicts of interest. Most of the changes were made in the section on permitted investments. So I think you're aware that generally every asset class listed under a California government code has a maximum maturity. It's listed, it's given to you, except for 4 asset classes: treasuries, agencies, municipal obligations, and negotiable certificates of deposit. Where there is no maximum maturity stated, as in the case of those 4 asset classes, where there is no maximum maturity stated, California government code places a blanket 5-year limit unless there's been permission received from the governing body of the agency. And then there's a cooling off period, a 3-month cooling off period. And that permission can be for an individual investment, or it can be for an investment that's part of an overall strategy or program. So we're seeking that you extend the maximum maturity for treasuries, federal agencies, and also municipal securities. And we're requesting that you do that from 5 to 7 years under that provision of the California Government Code. We are not advocating at this time a change to strategy. Your current strategy is to maintain the majority of your investments between 1 and 5 years, though there are investments that go shorter. That averages an average duration of 2.5 years. So it's generally, that's what the benchmark has. And we move around that benchmark within a band, about 20% of a band around that target. And this extension would not be utilized to move that duration target of 2.5 years. Rather, it would give us the opportunities to opportunistically pick up assets that are sometimes issued or have maturities just slightly longer than 5 years, where there may be a yield advantage. I can see that happening with certain treasuries. I can also see that happening with certain federal agency mortgage-backed securities, which you currently allow in your portfolio. So the intent of this change, and you can see here on my screen, we want to move to 7 years on treasuries, on agencies, and then I'm going to scroll ahead on the municipal securities. That's listed down here, 7 years. So the intent here is not to change the strategy, but rather to be able to enhance that 1 to 5 year strategy with periodic securities that might be just beyond the 5-year range, which are offering an attractive yield. When we would fold those securities into the strategy, we would still seek to target 2.5 years duration, and obviously within that 20% band, longer or shorter. And that's an important distinction. Let me pause there, because I think Director Wilkinson, you had forwarded some questions to staff, which in turn forwarded to me, and they wanted to make sure that your concerns are addressed. And that's a pretty important one. I want to pause and make sure that addresses the question you had.
Thank you, Carlos. Dr. Wilkinson, do you have something you want to ask or say here?
Yes, it does, and that's very helpful. The only question, because you talked there about the market benchmark that you use and that you're targeting, I think you said 2.5 years duration. Which market benchmark are we using?
So to measure you're currently looking at 2, and they're both very similar. We're really managing against both of them, but both of them have the exact or nearly the same duration range. So they're both around 2.5 years. The first is the 1 to 5 year U.S. Treasury and federal agency benchmark.
Yeah.
So it's the ICE. ICE is Intercontinental Exchange, B of A. That's the sponsor of the benchmark. 1 to 5 year U.S. Treasury and federal agency. So it's basically the universe of treasuries between 1 and 5 years, and a sprinkling of federal agencies, again between 1 and 5 years, duration of 2.5 years. Approximately. That moves around, obviously, as securities age out of that benchmark or age into it. We also utilize, because you're not just invested in treasuries and agencies, some of the feedback that we received from the board was to also include a benchmark with a credit component. So there is no perfect benchmark with a credit component. All the credit benchmarks have securities some form or another that you're not allowed to invest in under California government code. But we did find one that it's the closest to the code that we can find, and it is the 1 to 5 year U.S. It's government and credit agency credits between AAA to single A of U.S. issuers. There's still issues in there that you're not allowed to buy in that benchmark, but we still list it in our materials. We still look at it when we manage. As you're aware, I think Director Wilkinson, you've had some experience with this, and we've talked about this in the past. The biggest determinant of risk and return is not so much the credit component. The credit component is more of a risk measure that we have to manage against. But the biggest determinant is that duration positioning, and for that reason, both those benchmarks serve as our target, and that target is 2.5 years.
Okay, that all makes sense, and that somewhere is listed because it's listed in the policy, but it doesn't actually say anywhere what those two benchmarks are. So I know you're verbally confirming that those are there. I'm just wondering whether that's somewhere embedded in our documents. And then the only other question I have, which was mostly out of interest, so you've said your current duration is around 2.5 years. What's your average maturity?
It's going to be somewhere closer to 3 years on average. To take that question right now, the first question, or the question you asked prior, which was around listing it. So generally, so you do have it listed. There is a management directive that serves as a marching orders from staff to Chandler Asset Management, and that management directive lets us know what our parameters are within the policy, and included in that is the benchmark and the target duration. So that does exist, and it's an important document. I'm glad you pointed that out. Historically, for most local governments, we encourage them to encapsulate and codify that strategy and that benchmark in a management directive, mainly because if there's an emergency and you need to change strategy, and that benchmark and strategy are codified in the policy, you have to wait for the governing board to convene to then change that. And because this is a safety and liquidity portfolio, we don't think that that's in your best advantage. So as long as everything is within the confines of the investment policy, if it's allowed under the umbrella of what the policy allows, which the strategies are, you're covered.
Okay, that all makes sense. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
The other change, so I'd say that's probably the most significant change. There were some changes to California government code. You're seeing a lot of red on my screen, less so because of changes to code. That most of the changes are because we're trying to make this language under commercial paper be as close as possible to the actual language in California government code. It's just to improve readability, to make sure that it's very explicit. The biggest change really is up here. California government code changed in 2025 and became applicable in 2026, that you are now allowed to buy commercial paper. Prior to this was 9 months. You're now allowed to buy them up to 13 months or 397 days. The idea is that because the strategy that we pursue on your behalf is a longer duration strategy, we generally don't buy commercial paper. We're not really buying instruments that are shorter than a year. But if we're now having access to the commercial paper market, especially in the private placement market, 4A2 paper, it gives you an opportunity to further diversify. There are issuers in the commercial paper space that are desirable from a credit and liquidity standpoint, and we think that this is an enhancement to you. The other language is just simply on commercial paper to make it a little bit closer to California code. We did add bankers' acceptances. If you're not familiar with these are money market instruments that were created to facilitate international trade transactions. Simply, it's a time draft between banks from different countries, which basically make sure that the bankers get paid. But because it's a time draft, there's a time value of money associated with it. They don't come up very often from a value perspective, but if they do, we'd like to be able to take advantage of them. We also, I think on your memo, we did not list this correctly. I think we listed it as commercial paper, and that typo I was the origin of that typo. I apologize for that. But the next is CD placement services or placement service deposits. So MCE historically has utilized certain CD placement services. It's almost like a brokerage for CDs where they can take your funds and rather than place them all with one bank at some large amount, most banks won't take that because they have in California they have to collateralize those funds. So what most agencies do is they will buy CDs from different banks, but it gets very cumbersome to do that. So oftentimes up to the FDIC limit, up to the insurance limit of 250,000. If you can imagine with a portfolio your size, it's very difficult to lay that out across different banks. So there are services that do that on your behalf, and you do take advantage of those. You have in the past. I know that you've limited or minimized your investment in these, but the law did change on these. The law was that you could invest up to 30% of your funds, but you had there was a provision in 2026 that allowed you to go to 50%. What we did is we changed the language back to 30%, which is what you had before, but listed that provision here to 50%. And the reason we did it this way is because that provision now sunset in 2026. Prior to this, you had this provision, but it listed as sunsetting in 2026 is when it wrapped up. Senate Bill 595 extended this provision to 2031. So we've listed you, basically the way that this is written, it'll still allows you the 50% that you had prior, but it sunsets in 2031 when the law sunsets. We updated your language on money market mutual funds. There was no change on this. We just wanted to mirror California government code more closely. With municipal securities, you had a modifier for the minimum rating category. You required that municipal securities be rated A plus or higher, which is the top tier of the A rating category. We don't think that's to your advantage. We think that limits you. And the reason we'd like you to make it in the rating category of A, which means that it would allow any shade of A plus or A minus. And the reason we think that you should do that are for two reasons. Number one, because municipal bond defaults are very rare, very, very rare from a statistical standpoint. I think the statistic is that the ratings for a double B muni, which is junk upon status, is lower than a double A corporate, to give you an idea. So the number one, and number two, we are your investment advisor, and one of the things that we bring to the table on your behalf is a credit rating process and a risk management process to basically manage or mitigate the risk associated with your exposure to credit securities. So you do have credit analysis that goes into the process, and that credit analysis protects you. And this is one of the reasons why we feel comfortable in going down to just being able to allow the rating of category of single A. We also added municipal securities that are registered or treasury notes that are registered to the other 49 states in addition to the state of California. That was allowed, I believe, in 2014, but you hadn't included it. You didn't allow us to include it the last time. We're bringing it back to you for a couple of reasons. Number one, because it is a good diversifier. Number two, for the same reasons I stated earlier, these are very strong credits. They tend to be that way. Number three, these are limited under the law to bonds of the state level government and its agencies. So, for example, under this provision, you would be allowed to buy a bond from, say, from the state of Minnesota, but you would not be allowed to buy a bond from the city of Minneapolis. So you're not able to buy from its political subdivisions, but you are able to buy at the state level. The way we utilize these is that we like to buy bonds that are issued in very, very large tranches. So the deals could be $1 billion, $2 billion, and so we're not small lenders in a very or large lender in a very small deal. You want to be a small lender in a very large deal, and you really can only achieve that at the state level. And of course, we would be applying the same credit analysis and the same risk management policies and approach that we do with other credit related securities. This is going to be a diversifier. It would allow you to diversify your portfolio more. We do have a 30% limit on municipal securities. We've written it so that that 30% applies in the aggregate. So it would include both these asset classes here, not just 30% for California munis and 30% for munis of the other states. It would be in the aggregate. We've had a lot of discussions with staff on their liquidity position, and that's something that staff has been focusing on addressing and optimizing as best as they could. This is a provision you did not have in your policy before, but we had talked about it in the past, and we brought it back up once again. We do recommend that you allow the investment of funds in local government investment pools that are organized as joint powers authorities. There are currently 4 of them in the state of California. All 4 are, so this is besides local agency investment fund, which is the state level, the state pool. The 4 JPAs that are out there right now that sponsor local government investment pools, better known as LGIPs, the 4 LGIPs that are available to you are all triple AM rated, which is the highest rating that can be awarded by S&P Global by that type of investment. We think that it's a good idea to have it. To give you an idea, these operate a lot like a prime money market mutual fund. Currently, the mutual funds that you generally use, the money market mutual funds that you currently use, are governmental mutual funds, and you do that because governmental mutual funds are not required to mark to market the net asset value of every share. The NAV does not it does not float for governmental securities. If it were a prime fund where you have a credit component, SEC laws 2A7 rules would require that NAV floats, and that defeats the purpose of a money market mutual fund. It's generally a place to park cash, and you want to invest dollar in and dollar out. The local government investment pools that I'm discussing are basically dollar in, dollar out, but they don't have to mark to market, so you can operate on a book value basis. What most of them, not all, but what most of them use to protect you is they follow the GASB 79 framework, which is a framework from the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, which requires a certain level of liquidity and credit quality in the underlying assets to protect the shareholders, the participants in the program. So we're recommending that you add this. We think that this is going to help you enhance any liquid funds amongst the already the options that you're already using, and we think that it'll be a net benefit for you. Also, there was a change in the law. There are sometimes bonds, especially in the municipal market, which are issued, and the settlement date for them is very long. If you think about the mechanics of a bond market trade, or any bond, you purchase the security, you enter into a trade with a broker, and that becomes the trade, and you own it, but you haven't paid for it. Payment is transferred to the broker a day or two days later, 2 to 3 days later. And so that's called the settlement trade, the settlement date. You enter into the trade on the trade date, and a few days later, you settle the trade by paying for the security. The money actually exchanges hands a few days later. There are some securities that are issued with settlement dates that are TBD, or to be announced, or to be determined. And sometimes that can be a long time, depending on how long the issuer is taking to price that bond. So California code changed and said that in essence, you're not allowed to buy anything that has a settlement period of longer than 45 days. We think that protects you. It's a good idea. And for that reason, we've included it into your policy. The language you see at the bottom here goes back to the 7-year change that we were talking about treasuries, agencies, and munis. We added this language to mirror what is stated in California Government Code 53601. We added the 3-month cooling off period so that you would be able to make this happen. Those are the changes for this year. As your CFO stated, the intent here is to keep in touch or keep on top of California Government Code changes. Make sure that you're adding the best practices available, and make sure that you include a process to make sure that the policy is readable, understandable, and not very important for us as your money manager, not open to interpretation. We like to see black and white policies where there's no question as to what can be bought or not bought. And that again, that's a measure that protects you. We think the language that's added here takes you further into that direction. With that, I'll stop and take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Carlos. I appreciate that. And you going through each of the recommendations and proposed changes. Thank you. I'm just going to let everybody know we are at 11:30. We're going to continue with this meeting until we finish this item. And Director Wilkinson.
Carlos, thank you for that very detailed presentation. Quick question for you, because I know you manage a bunch of other CCA funds as well. The policies that we have are pretty much consistent with other CCAs and other public agency funds that you manage. You're making similar recommendations there as well.
So the recommendations that I have for you are commonly used for other local governments. Where you might differ from other local governments and even other CCAs is the strategy. Although most of them because some of the funds are going to be more core, you see a lot of them moving towards the strategy that you currently have. But yes, I think your question is, are we advising these changes in other policies? Absolutely. This is the bare minimum that we have. The way that we operate is every year we track the changes, the legislative changes. We make sure that we examine their impact. Sometimes we're called upon to testify on how they're going to impact local governments because we're experts at this and we're known in California. So we track this very carefully, and we encapsulate these in a model policy, which we utilize to then update our clients' policies. And yours is a policy that lagged a little bit behind the model policy. It was just the bias that the agency had when we first started working with you a few years ago. I think that you've gotten a level of comfort with the type of investments that you've been doing. You've gotten a level of comfort with how investments are governed under California government code. You've grown in sophistication and in needs, and these recommendations, which to us would be standard in other agencies, we'd like to make standard for you as well.
So what you're saying is that because we were new at this, we were a little bit risk averse going in, and now we're sort of normalizing to other funds that you manage.
That's exactly what I'm saying, Director.
Okay, perfect. And then the other question I have, because the bit that made me interested was the expansion into the local government investment pools. And my question there, and I guess this is for Maida as well, is because we manage all of our funds for our little city through CalTrust, and we just take money in and out every day or whatever it is that we need, and that's how we manage all of our liquidity. Is the intention here with setting this up that some of that cash sitting at River City Bank is going to be moving over to the asset management side on a very liquid basis?
So that's an ongoing discussion that and I don't know if this question is for your CFO or for me.
I don't
want to usurp your CFO, but what I will tell you, I will share with you that the discussions that I've had with your finance staff has been that they look at this every day. They know what the exposure is, and it's something that they've worked for. This language that we're proposing is specifically designed to address that very concern. The idea is the steps are, number one, you want to look at cash flow. You spent a lot of time discussing what your days cash on hand was, and obviously your operations are going to determine how much you need to keep liquid, and liquid can be from cash all the way out to a year, and obviously that's part of it, and also just your known outflows that are coming out. You have a good idea of what your revenues are, and you've got less of an idea of what your outflows are going to be because of the uncertainty in the power markets. We understand all of that, but ultimately the idea is to first minimize the amount of funds that are in cash, and that's something that staff has been doing because they look at it and periodically they come back to me and say, Chandler, Carlos, we're going to send you more cash because we've determined that we don't need this. We'd like you to get it invested in a longer portfolio. So one of the things that you'll see is that the core portfolio has grown over time because staff has identified amounts of cash that they knew weren't going to be needed. They're conservative about it, but they've been very deliberate about that. So that's minimized the cash position unless the cash position has grown because of minimized expenditures or increased revenues. But they've been very deliberate about that over time. That's the first piece. The second piece is after you've optimized that cash, after you've reduced the amount of cash that you've held, even though you're earning well on it, you're doing well on it, you can do better in the longer portfolio over time. After you've minimized that cash, then the discussion becomes, with the cash that's left over, what options are we looking at? And River City Bank has been a very good partner for you. They've provided you some good rates. They've got some good deals for you. But of course, they're a smaller organization. Your exposure is significant. And one of the things that staff has been focusing on is, what other options do we have out there? Obviously, a money market fund sweep at the bank is part of it, but that has limitations because code limits you, and your earnings are lower than what you're getting at River City. They're lower than what you're getting at LAIF, and they're lower than what you're getting at LDLGIPs. You do have access to LAIF, and then of course now if the board approves this, you'll have access to LGIPs. CalTrust is a very well-run program. They do a great job. There are 3 others. The fourth is brand new in October, and we were engaged to manage it. It's called CalFit, and for the last 6 months, it's been the highest yielding pool in the land alongside another one. So it's an option for you. It's an option for you to have. The language that we have would allow you to use any of them.
Okay, that all makes great sense to me, and I think that's a really good step forward, because I don't know about the fund that you've just set up, but obviously with CalTrust, there's a liquidity fund in there, and so that really is cash. So even if you screw up on your estimates of needed liquidity, it's right there for you. And so I would continue to encourage staff to maintain as few funds as possible at River City Bank with its BBB- negative outlook. It's not a good look, just isn't. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wilkinson. Any other directors before we bring this to public comment? Not seeing anybody else wanting to mention anything. Let's look for public comment.
I see no raised hands online, Chair.
Okay, so bringing this back, looking at the fiscal impact, it says none at this time. Certain revisions provide additional flexibility to enhance portfolio diversification and investment earnings over time, which we like. So the recommendation here is that the Finance Committee recommend to the Board of Directors approval of the policy 14 investment policy, which are 9 policy changes. I'm personally very comfortable with them. I thank Carlos for his detailed presentation and for the expertise. I feel very good about our money's in good hands. And so on that, do we have a motion to approve this recommendation?
I can make that motion, Wilkinson.
Thank you.
And I second that. I share your opinion, Chair.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Wilkinson, a second by McCormick. A roll call, please.
Belvedere?
Yes.
Lafayette?
Yes.
Napa County?
Yes.
Vallejo?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Excellent. Moving to 8 quickly. Do we have any committee or staff announcements? Not seeing any. Okay, so we're going to adjourn this meeting at 11:38. Our next regular scheduled Finance Committee meeting will be on August 27th at 10 a.m. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, staff.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a
Bye-bye.
great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.